With 6 official series, it's no surprise that Law & Order has seen a lot of characters come and go over the past 30 years. And some have been long-lasting, while others didn't last a full season. There's some characters that were meant to be temporary as fill-in partners and didn't have much impact. And although casting is usually good, it doesn't really matter if the characters aren't well written. And as much as fans would love seeing some of the characters return, we've come up with a list of Law & Order characters folks weren't necessarily upset to see leaving the show, and still regarded as misfires amid a usually strong evolving cast for the franchise. Let's take a look. Number 10. Casting 2-time Oscar winner Diane West was a major move for Law & Order. It's a shame her character could never be worthy of her talents. Taking up as the interim DA after Adam Schiff, Lewin was a former law professor and was often called wishy-washy by characters of the show. She seemed too detached from cases and lacked the commanding presence to put others in place. Nor would clash with McCoy on things like the death penalty, but it simply wasn't believable she could achieve such a high position without seeming to be that passionate about the law. She was gone in 2 years with the explanation she decided that she wasn't a good fit to be DA. It's one time the fandom was totally on her side. Number 9. Law & Order Los Angeles had a rough reputation and rubbed off on Joe Decker. The first half of the series had Decker splitting ADA work with Morales, and while the character was supposed to be a sharp attorney with over 100 victories, he just didn't seem to dominate in the courtroom. Terrence Howard, who plays Joe Decker, often sounded bored in his summations and didn't show the passion the character was supposed to have. And a crossover with SVU didn't help either. Decker showed a bit more arrogance and mocked Novak while defending an accused attacker. And when the show did its mid-season retool, Morales was a cop again while Decker was the sole ADA, which only highlighted his shortcomings. Terrence Howard is a great actor, but for this role, like the rest of Law & Order LA, never lived up to its potential. Number 8. A few times on Criminal Intent, Goren would be a great partner when Ames was on assignment. Each one illustrated just how vital the Goren-Ames chemistry was. Insert G. Lynn Bishop was probably the worst of them. Samantha Buck was good enough in the role, but lacked the ability to understand Goren's quirks. There were too many cases that were centered around her complaining about his actions and then smugly acting as if they were a tight unit. Now, she was meant to be a temporary fill-in, but that also made it hard for audience to really get invested in her. Barely given a backstory or even a character, Bishop seemed a wasted persona that marred Goren's usual fun. Number 7. The point was to really make this guy annoying, but leave it to SVU to go too far with it. Dale Stuckey almost looked like the show was mocking the lab techs of CSI. A crime scene worker, Dale soon annoyed Stabler and Benson with his overeager attitude and terrible jokes. But what was worse was how Dale would be downright eager boasting about his findings and then going too far trying to cover up evidence. After a major error he made nearly caused a serial killer to be released, Stuckey snapped. First, he killed an innocent woman to frame that killer, then realized he liked it. He was eventually arrested and sent to jail. It was a harsh fate for what started as just an unlikable character who ended up being a monster. Number 6. Any character to step in Benson's shoes was rough, but Danny Beck was pretty bad. When Benson was on an undercover FBI assignment, Stabler was paired with Beck, a tough cop whose policeman husband was murdered. Beck had a lot of darkness to her. She and Stabler clashed a few times, culminating in sharing a kiss each instantly realized was a mistake. It was soon obvious she was just too emotionally invested in the cases to handle the job, and after a rough case involving child slavery, Beck ultimately quit the unit. Her tenure was just further proof of why the Stabler-Benson dynamic works so wonderfully. Number 5. If there was an actor who seemed perfect for Law & Order, Dennis Farina was it. A former real-life Chicago cop, Farina was well known for his roles in various TV cop shows like Crime Story. Having him follow Jerry Orbach as Green's partner should have been great. Not. Somehow, Fontana never clicked as well as he should have. his wisecracks were lacking, and when he threw folks with things like being wealthy while talking as if he was a blue-collar cop. It became even worse when Green was shot, and Fontana's partnership with Nick Falco was a major letdown. Even an episode delving into him investigating a crime of his past wasn't even well accepted. The fact that Farina barely lasted one season with the show still remains a head-scratcher. Number 4. After the departure of Casey Novak, the SVU team needed a compelling new ADA. Unfortunately, Kim Grayleg wasn't quite it. Now, that character was openly named, quote, the Crusader for advocating for women's rights and being stern in the courtroom. Although maybe she was a little too stern with Michaela McManus, coming off all business and very much no levity. We should note it also became very clear that Grayleg wasn't a great lawyer, because she definitely lacked the capabilities of Novak and Cabot. At one point, a perp beat her down in a courtroom after Kim foolishly taunted her. She was written out by returning to DC, as the show never made Kim the sharp attorney that she was supposed to be. Number 3. Chester Lake seemed to be working on a completely different cop show. He entered SVU as a Brooklyn cop that suspected a case of his was connected to one the team was investigating. He boasted about his blue-collar credentials, which somehow included a stint as an MMA fighter, and he and Finn were partnered up a lot. Yet, Lake seemed way too serious, even for SVU's world, and often appeared to operate on a different mentality than the rest of the team. He and Finn clashed on way too many cases. His end was rough because he discovered a police officer was behind a heinous crime. Lake ended up taking justice into his own hands to shoot the guy and then was sent to prison. The SVU cops may bend the rules, but one becoming a perp himself was way too much to take. Number 2. Sometimes shifting up a format doesn't always work. After years of only male detectives, the Mothership Law & Order series tried something new by having Green paired with Nina Cassidy. It quickly became obvious, though, that the problem wasn't about her being a woman, but rather she just wasn't a good detective. Melina Govich was clearly trying, but Nina wasn't believable as a tough cop who was also prone to many mistakes. She was openly chewed out by Van Buren, who was at one point flat out told Nina that she just wasn't cut out for the unit. Her partnership with Green is arguably the worst of any in Law & Order, as they just didn't gel as a unit. And by the next season, Nina was gone with no explanation. It is truly a shame a historic first as a female Law & Order cop just ended so poorly. Number 1. It takes a lot to make a character so unsympathetic the audience is rooting for them to die. Introduced as the new ADA, Sonya Paxton quickly irritated every member of the SVU unit. Sonya Paxton was steely in the courtroom and snappish, arrogant, and often mocked Stabler after being thrown off of a roof. And as it turns out, Sonya was fighting some personal issues that culminated in her showing up to a trial drunk. This led to her being suspended, but somehow talking her way back to work. In the end, Sonya ended up being killed by a stalker, yet it was difficult for the audience to care too much given how abrasive and unlikable she'd just been to everyone. Well, that's all for our list. Did we miss anybody that deserves to be on the list? Let us know in the comments. And as always, like this video, share if you care, but be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you all at the next one.